Netflix is currently continuing its conquest of all televised media and has now gotten the rights to create a TV series based off the Witcher novels. My natural disposition towards video games being adapted into any other form of media ranges from skepticism to horror. However, the Witcher games were based off a series of great fantasy novels, and it appears that the Netflix series is wisely choosing to adapt the novels instead of the games. Because of this, I believe that this adaptation can actually be strong, if it's handled correctly, that is. Speaking as a moderate fan of the series, I played all 3 of the games and I read the first 4 novels, I think I have a fairly strong understanding of what storytelling the Witcher franchise excels in. So on to this loser's pointless suggestions that'll get ignored and ultimately don't matter. So the first method I recommend is to rely on short stories. The first 2 novels in the Witcher franchise, The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny, were a series of short stories that were loosely chronological. They took place all over the world of The Witcher called The Continent. However, they all had a common procedure. They all follow the main character, Geralt, on a journey, and he had to solve an issue for somebody. The problem could be solved through swordplay and assassination, but it could also be done through negotiation and detective work. They were fairly simple, entertaining pulp stories. This format is perfect for a TV series. The stories never usually go more than 40 pages, which is perfect for a 1-hour time slot on Netflix. If there isn't enough material to cover in an episode, include some extended lore or characterization. Since the stories usually go at such a fast pace in the novels, and they often include a multitude of characters, give some of them distinct looks and personalities. It'll help visualize and flesh out the world of The Witcher even more. I think beginning with an overarching story limits possibilities. Much like the progression of the novels, I believe it's a good idea to begin with the short stories to establish the world and the main characters who reside in it. Short stories have enough content contained in them individually to allow for strong episodes. By beginning with a long-form narrative, the creators put a lot of trust in their audience to be committed to the narrative they're going to weave, and it doesn't really provide ample introduction into The Witcher's thematic storytelling. The main drive for books 3 to 6 overarching narrative takes time to develop, and the first season of the show can easily captivate its audience with unique and creative tales, but that's only if it sticks to the short story philosophy. So the second method that I recommend is to rely on character drama. There's plenty of monster and human bloodshed to go around in the Witcher novels, but action was never the focal point of The Witcher. The Witcher focuses on the why instead of the what. What is the purpose for the scuffle between these individuals? What's the morality behind the decision to fight this group of bandits? Is it even worth the time, or will it only create more conflict in the long run? These questions are important in Witcher. They're more important than the answer, arguably. But don't misconstrue my words, the action moments in The Witcher are great, as they are complemented well by the acrobatics and preparedness of the main character Geralt. This is also an opportunity to show Geralt's multifaceted qualities. I think it was kind of a shame that the trailers for The Witcher 3 made the game look like thoughtless, edgy, grimdark garbage. It made Geralt into a super badass with no flaws who slices up everything without a thought. This couldn't be farther from his character in the novels and even in the video games. More often than not, Geralt's meddling either solves nothing within the grand scheme, or it makes things worse for everyone involved. Geralt follows an archaic Witcher code of morality that doesn't mesh well with the contemporary standards. This causes his actions to clash with a lot of the public's, and it paints him as a weird outsider. Geralt's remorse for ever becoming a Witcher, and the thought of others having to endure the process terrifies him. He's unable to connect with many people, and regardless of his actions, his image within the public light is that of a monster. This is questionable morality that makes for fantastic television and discussion. Geralt, Yennefer, Dandelion, and Triss are characters who can't be characterized by cliches. I can't call Geralt a misunderstood loner because that's just dishonest to his character. I can't call Triss the loving best friend because that fails to include her motives and other facets of her personality. It's easy to try to classify Yennefer as a cold, unforgiving raven, but that misunderstands her whole backstory. These characters and their conflicts write themselves, and all it takes is thoughtful adaptation. So the third method that I think that can make the shows pretty good is keep the war and politics away, like far, far away. Because I have a confession. I eventually gave up on the Witcher novels after I finished the 4th book. I didn't do this because the books were bad. but because I didn't enjoy the direction that the series took after the end of the second book. As discussed earlier, the first two novels consisted of short stories that were either loosely tied together or not at all. The third novel began a continuous, epic narrative that followed political turmoil in the land, while many factions attempted to take control of Ciri for their own personal gain. The personal drama the characters underwent was very interesting, and Ciri herself is a great character, but the boardroom meetings and the war talk bored me to tears. It also didn't help that these factors weren't a major part of the introductory novels, so I wasn't prepared to comprehend the regions, alliances, kingdoms, kings, rulers, and all the other encyclopedic knowledge required of me. I wasn't able to understand land's position in relation to other lands, so I embarrassingly had to conduct the official map of the continent. I mean, this isn't really a fault of the author, Andrzej Sapkowski. I think I said that right. This is just my own personal interpretation of what makes The Witcher special. I believe war and political drama are not The Witcher's greatest boons. When the series focuses too much on jargon and kingdom names, it feels like a light, incomplete version of Game of Thrones. There's already a politically focused fantasy drama that's one of the biggest shows of this generation. When The Witcher focuses too heavily on its weakness, it loses its charm. Superficially, comparisons of dark fantasy are always made to Game of Thrones, and in trying to emphasize the political aspect of The Witcher, it hampers its own identity. So the fourth method that I think could actually make the Witcher series really good is play up the mystery aspect of it. So, I've been talking about the Witcher's identity, but what is that identity? What makes this fantasy story different from the hundreds of others? Well, one of the fascinating bits in the short stories is the detective work that Geralt needs to do to resolve conflict. This aspect of the novels is seen heavily in The Witcher 3 with the Witcher senses. This can be a fascinating storytelling method, where Geralt deduces his surroundings and comes to a conclusion based on that. The audience will be following Geralt as he does this, so they have their own shot at attempting to piece the mystery together themselves. The Witcher senses are also a good way for us to get into Geralt's way of thinking. It provides more insight into his character and allows for more development of his abilities. His knowledge of the world's creatures and his deductions also provide great world building and emphasizes the mystical creatures that are present in The Witcher. And the monsters that Geralt will encounter can provide him with that identity of a monster slayer, and it shows that this process isn't just killing. Being a Witcher requires strategy, it requires time to go find a solution. Stories won't be go kill big bad. Maybe Geralt will discover that the monster is actually intelligent and that it attacked local farm animals because it was desperate for food. And maybe this food shortage was caused by the local villagers. This could lead to a conclusion that isn't Geralt swinging his swords at a foe, but negotiating a peace treaty between the monster and the villagers. And perhaps maybe it can lead to a mutual trade deal or something like that, where the troll can provide protection while the villagers provide him food. See, there's many possibilities that come from this form of storytelling. Don't make the answers clear, keep the audience guessing, and it'll keep them more engaged with the material. The fifth suggestion I have to make this series pretty good is just smile a little. Like, The Witcher can crack jokes. Geralt himself has a sarcastic sort of humor, and the villagers around him can say some pretty funny things. I never even perceived the Witcher franchise as grimdark edgelord fantasy. The environments are too lush for that, and the tone of the stories are too whimsical. There are a lot of serious moments, as The Witcher is a fantasy and not a comedy tale, but there's a lot of humorous and even beautiful situations. Like, people don't care about Geralt's relationship with Yennefer and Triss because they're super stoic and only expose. People care about them because they have chemistry, they smile and crack jokes together, and they deeply care for one another. These are positive emotions that resonate with people, and it's important to show these as well. I think it's best to have the series not take itself too seriously and allow Geralt to have his signature sardonic wit alongside other funny characters like Dandelion. So my sixth and final method that I think can make the show really good is stick to the European roots, because they are strong roots. The final piece of The Witcher's identity are its pagan roots in mystical environments. It's not often that you see raw, pure fantasy anymore. It's rare to see fairies, goblins, orcs, and other tokens of the genre. But regardless of their modern rarity, these are still cliches that have been overutilized in fantasy. But this is where The Witcher's uniqueness comes in. It takes creatures that are very rarely used in the fantasy genre, and if it chooses to use generic creatures, it decides to give them a new twist. For example, a troll under a bridge is a classic myth, but The Witcher's version is an alcoholic troll who's been ostracized by the local village and has had his wife murdered right in front of him. He hides under that bridge because there's no place in the world for him, so he can't explore. It takes the original fairy tale, but expands on it and gives it a unique flavor. Personally, I think it's fascinating to see folklore from cultures that I've never seen before given life. But I can easily see this becoming a problem if the budget isn't high enough for the series. If cheap CG has to be done because Netflix skimped on The Witcher, which I fear may happen, then these creatures will lose a lot of their life and identity. The show will look cheap and lose its edge over other fantasy products. And honestly, I believe having creatures from pagan and Polish mythology helps the Witcher franchise establish a larger audience, because the audience would be more receptive to the oddities within the universe. This is an ample opportunity to be creative and let artists flourish with their talents. There isn't really a modern fantasy series that focuses on monster hunting and their tendencies, so this is a serious advantage. So in conclusion, Netflix, please let this series be humorous. Just keep the war and politics out of the main story. It's not Game of Thrones. Focus on the characters of the story and the creatures' narratives, and save an ongoing narrative for maybe a later season once you've established this universe and you've gotten a strong fan base. Just please don't mess it up.
What are you doing?
Killing monsters.